The uncertainty is deepening over what happens next in West Asia. And while concerns are mounting over the situation and where things are headed, after the US said it launched those new strikes on southern Iran on Monday, targeting Iranian missile sites and boats attempting to place mines, allegedly, the US said it launched those new strikes. And Iran has warned the US after those strikes. But what does all of this mean for the region? What about the negotiations? To discuss all of this and lots more, with me on the broadcast this minute is a very special guest, Iran analyst, author of War in 140 Characters, and Nuclear Iran, writer and journalist. Thanks very much for being here on the broadcast, David.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Up front, let's just talk about the messaging that's been given out by the US. Now, Marco Rubio, in fact, saying on Tuesday that negotiating a deal with Iran could take a few days, he said, quashing hopes for that imminent end to the conflict. But what do you make of the move by the US coming at a crucial juncture like this, launching those strikes when the question marks do remain over the talks and the negotiations?
Well, look, Donald Trump said that the Iranians need to sort of make progress on negotiations or there will be consequences. He hinted that these consequences would be kinetic, would be military. So in one sense, I guess he's being true to his word. The Iranians now, of course, will take great umbrage at this. They've already said that this is a gross violation of the ceasefire. If it is true that they were targeting missile sites and boats that were laying mines in the Strait of Hormuz, then the Americans will say that they're justified. Understand it. Everyone must understand that this is a two-pronged process here. There are negotiations, there is a carrot, and then there is a stick. I think the Americans are calculating that the Iranians, which people have forgotten, were completely hammered in terms of their command and control structure, in terms of their military infrastructure during the war that really was underway in March 2026. And that the Iranians need this deal. People forget the Iranians have mismanaged their economy for so long, they're so corrupt, that the one revenue generating thing that they have is their oil. So the closure of the strait affects them as well as everybody else. So the Americans are clearly applying maximum pressure to ensure that the Iranians come to the deal and make the best deal possible for the United States and for the world.
If I can just come in there, because you talk about the pressure being exerted, but is it really working so far, given the economic pressure, specifically when it comes to the situation at the Hormuz Strait, the blockade and the kind of moves that have been made by the United States? But at the end of the day, would you say that kind of pressure has worked at all on Iran? Because at the end of the day, the main key to that development does remain with Iran.
Yeah, that's a very good point. The answer is highly questionable. I mean, we are, in many ways, negotiating to get the straits, to put the straits back into the position that they were before the beginning of the war. But clearly this is Donald Trump. Clearly Donald Trump, when he's under pressure, he doubles down and doubles down and doubles down. Will it work? I don't know. It could well backfire, especially when the energy shock, which hasn't hit the world yet, really starts to bite in June. It's a big gamble, but then this is a man who has made a career, not just in politics, but in reality TV, in business, of gambling and gambling and gambling. And what happens when you gamble? Well, as we know, you can go bankrupt several times, as Donald Trump did go bankrupt. Maybe the Iranians will cave, or maybe this will be Donald Trump's political bankruptcy. We will see.
Right. What do you see happening here onwards, specifically when it comes to the negotiations and the situation in the region overall? Let's just zoom out and look at whether or not this actually means that the ceasefire has, in fact, ended and the war has resumed, would you say? And also when it comes to the negotiations that are expected, how optimistic are you?
Look, in terms of whether the war has started again or the ceasefire is over, I'm not sure. The thing about ceasefires around the world, whether they be in Iran or indeed in Ukraine, is that they are more observed in the breach than in the observance, if you see what I mean. So I think this is actually fairly common. Look, I've always said, and I maintain this, that in the end, I believe a deal will be reached for the simple reason that everybody needs it. The Iranians need to get some kind of relief, okay? Sanctions relief, economic relief. They need the strait open. The Americans need the strait open to get out of this war, which hasn't gone according to plan. The world needs the strait open because they need that shipping lane, that energy artery open. And that's everyone, including the Chinese, who are a big de facto supporter of Iran. So we'll get there, but how long? I don't know. There's more pain to come before we do. That I can be sure about, the only thing I can be sure of.
All right, I have to ask you also for your comments on how the US president has been linking the deal to the Abraham Accords. The immediate question also is, will that strategy really work, and do we really see all the countries doing what he really has, in a way, suggested should happen?
Probably not. I think Donald Trump says a lot of things and links a lot of things to other things that don't really make any sense to anybody else. I also think he says a lot of things just off the top of his head without thinking. But no, I think the Abraham Accords for the moment are probably on pause. They have held, that's important, all throughout Gaza. Not a single Arab country has walked away from them. But trying to link Iran to the Abraham Accords, I think, is a distraction. I don't think it's serious policy, and I don't think any of the countries he's talking about possibly joining are considering it right now anyway.
Who would you say at this point really needs the war to end more, given the domestic situation? Would you say it's Iran or the United States? Because Donald Trump has been under tremendous pressure domestically as well when it comes to this war and the sentiment on the ground, really.
Look, again, another good question. I think both need it to end for different reasons. The Iranians are in an existential, I mean, their state could collapse. You know, this inflation is huge, unemployment is huge. Trump needs it politically. There's going to be a huge energy shock that's going to affect his allies more than the States, but Trump is also in his last term. This is a man that doesn't have much ideology beyond Donald Trump and one or two things that he's just adhered to his whole life, like tariffs. But from what I can gather and the people I speak to in DC, he really, really does want to deal with Iran. So perhaps, and this is Trump, he's prepared to take on that political cost, thinking, well, I'll be gone soon anyway, the midterms will lose the House anyway, so what do I have to lose? Again, we'll wait and see. With Trump, you never know, and that actually is one of the big hands he has in negotiations. People just never know what he's going to do, and he could do something really, really crazy.
And what are the options before Iran, according to you right now? What are the kind of cards that it could play when it comes to these negotiations here onwards, given where things stand now?
Look, Iran has had, is an isolated state, a state in a very bad financial situation, a state which its own population is in open revolt against it more or less constantly now. It has very few points of leverage. It had its nuclear program, that was a political point of leverage, which is, severely degraded, and it has the Strait of Hormuz, and that's what it's going to use. The Iranians are very sophisticated, they're very smart, they will use expertly the points of leverage they have, the cards, to use a Donald Trump metaphor, they will play the cards they have, they're playing them very well, and it will keep, threatening the global economy via the Strait until it gets the best deal that it can. Donald Trump is determined to give the Americans the best deal we can. This is the standoff, and in the interim, everybody watches and suffers.
What are the implications of these developments over the last 24 to 48 hours and overall for the region and beyond, given that the impact, of course, is being seen with each passing day when it comes to the global energy supplies? But just looking at the way things have panned out over the last 48 hours, of course, the needle keeps shifting. But do you really see the impact worsening from here onwards globally?
Well, look, it depends what happens, okay? If there's a return to conflict, then and the straits remain closed, then, the energy situation will get worse. But then it will affect even Iran's de facto allies. We just don't know. The Iranians want a deal. I spent years analysing Iranian nuclear negotiations. All the Western diplomats and other diplomats I would speak to say the Iranians were just interested in dragging things out. They send all of their, a lot of their remaining top guys to Islamabad to negotiate. They're serious, they want a deal. As I say, I think it will come for the simple reason that everybody needs it, but it's going to be a rocky road and there'll be more pain until we get there. Right now, it's a question of who blinks first.
All right, we're leaving it there for the moment. David, thanks very much for joining us here on the broadcast. Thank you.